Good evening and welcome once again to the Taco Society Presents. And I'm here with my great co-hosts.
Yes.
Gardner.
Hello.
Sydney.
Hey.
Welcome to episode 6.
Episode 6
And
of
I'm
the...
Phil.
And he's Phil of the Taco Society. And we're going to spend a minute or two talking about Nikon, which was...
What is Nikon, Tony?
Well,
Great question.
It
I
is.
wanted to know that too.
it's a New England conference of mainly writers, but there's also a lot of fans, and I want to say ordinary people, but people from all walks of life coming. They don't have to be writers. There's a lot of artists there that go.
Yeah, it's great.
But it's about horror writers, right?
Well, it's mostly it's dark fiction.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's the Northeast Writers Conference,
You said the North-
NECon.
You said Northeast, so where is this located?
It's located in Bristol, Rhode Island. At what used to be well, it still is now Roger Williams University. It's just not part of the main campus.
Okay.
We were just talking. They took the pool out and they put a lounge in. And if you look at not this episode or the next, but the one after that, you're going to see a taping done at Nikon, and we can go into that a little bit later, but that turned out quite well.
And as you were saying, so many great writers who were there.
You know what? I'm glad you bring that up because I've got a list of some of the great writers that were there. This is a who's who of horror and speculative fiction.
Yeah.
I won't go into everybody's name because it would probably take a half hour, but the ones that come to mind, Chris Golden, Jim Moore, Charles Rutledge, Heather Graham, who's also a very famous romance writer.
Yeah.
Chet Williamson, who I absolutely love.
That's great. Yeah.
Jeff Strand, everybody knows Jeff
So
Strand.
funny.
Janet Holden.
Yep.
Hal Bodner.
Yep.
John McElveen, who's a New England tried and true gentleman.
And he's breaking out this year. He's got good stuff coming out.
Inflictions, Hannah Ware. The guy is just on a roll. He's great. Yeah. Bracken McLeod.
Bracken.
Yeah.
He and his kilt.
He and his kilt and his pal there with
Eric Nunnally.
Eric Nunnally. I'm trying to something under the sun. I'm drawing a blank now. His book.
Eric's?
Yeah.
Well, people were just
Sorry, Eric.
Yeah.
Brian Keene, Linda Addison, Paul Tremblay, and a host of others. It was like I said, a who's who of horror. It was enjoyable.
Phil and I didn't get to make it.
You got to come next year. It was. I thought this year's Nikon was the most laid back and relaxing that I've been to, and I've been to 6 of them.
Yeah.
It was a fun time.
This was the 35th Nikon. The man who founded it, Bob Booth, has basically done it with his family, his son and his daughter, and his wife, Mary. And Bob died of cancer last year and was just adored by so many people. We went to his funeral and the services for him and so on. And so the tradition's continuing with the rest of the family. So this was the 35th one, and they always limit it to 200 people. And when it fills up, it fills up. Sometimes they'll give out a day pass, but people stay over. They play songs and have cookout during the night, and it is awesome. It's so good.
It's a lot of fun.
Pictures you took were fantastic.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I must have taken, I want to say 450 pictures.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were great.
And one of the key things about Nikon is that they specifically ask people. There's a certain period they have for the Nikon roast, where they always sneak in and roast one of the writers or a person who's always been helping at Nikon or whatever. And
We're not
Matt?
supposed to say too much
Oh.
about the roast.
right, they
Oh,
can't
Be
say you
careful.
can't say too much about the roast.
What
but
happens
they-
at Nikon stays at Nikon.
That's the key thing. They ask people to please don't record anything. We're just keeping this amongst ourselves. So if you want to find out what that's like,
Gotta go.
you got to go.
And let me tell you something. It's something you'll never forget
No,
once you
it's
see
insane.
it.
So much fun.
It is
Can you
crazy.
say who the individual was that was roasted?
Sefer Giron.
Sefer Giron, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Sefer, a great writer, it's just
Out of
terrific
Canada,
writer.
yeah, great
Tarot
lady.
card reader from
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's
The
cool.
crystal ball. She does it all.
Yeah, man.
It just let you know some of the panels because it is more than just playing guitar, drinking, and having a good time and seeing people. I'm just going to let you read off some of the panels that we attended. This year's best reading, and that included horror, science fiction, and fantasy. The best bad movies, and that was quite a panel. That was a lot of fun. The art of the short story, and portraying mental illness in or as horror, and that was also a very informal panel. So
You mean informative?
Informative.
Yeah, right.
What did I say, informal? It was
But
informal.
they are
It was
informal
informative
as well.
too.
Yeah, and it's great too because as a guy who came back from L.A. and wanted to get more into prose writing, I met Bob and his son at a bookstore. Bob Booth, the man who had started this up, and we were talking about a writer named T.E.D. Klein.
Oh yeah.
And
Great
T.E.D.
writer.
Klein is just amazing.
Absolutely.
He's got a collection of novellas called Dark Gods, is his novel The Ceremonies. And Ted Klein used to edit Twilight Zone magazine. I've never met him, but a lot of these people knew him. And they're like, oh, we know Ted Klein. I'm like, really? He goes, hey, he comes to our convention. I'm like, what convention is this? And they're like,
I'm
oh,
there.
Yeah, they're like, you got to come down. So I ended up not going. And then another friend of mine, my friend Ed Haggerty, who lives down in Nashua, Ed's a great guy. Really loved Joe Lansdale's stuff. Joe has gone a couple times, and his daughter Casey has visited.
Stephen King's been.
Stephen King, Joe Hill.
Next year, guest of honor.
Joe
Hill.
Joe Hill, man. And,
So maybe there'll be a surprise visit from a relative.
from his dad or one of his other siblings who's a writer. I mean, who knows?
Owen, yeah.
They're all, it's like insane. But so I went down, and there I met F. Paul Wilson, Tom Monteleone, Doug Winter, Linda, amazing poetry, Chris Golden, such really nice people, and they helped pull me in. Brian Keene, Mary San Giovanni, and these people were already established best-selling writers.
And they take the time to sit down with a Gardner, with a Tony, with anybody.
Right.
I can remember seeing Jim Moore in the hotel lobby at 4 o'clock in the morning, talking with a fan, talking about his work, how he writes, and he was really interested in what the fan had to say and the fan's writing career. And Jim's been like that with me also, and with so many others.
That's why he's the great.
I call him the great
James
James A.
He
Moore.
is
He's
just a
wonderful.
great guy, and he's moved up to New England. What a good guy, good guy. I mean, they're all great people. If people, we're mentioning these names. James A. Moore, if you get a chance, he's got a fantasy series out in the
Seven
stores
Forges.
now.
Yeah.
7 Forges. In fact, I have a copy of it out in my car right
Which
now.
you picked as your favorite.
Last year.
Oh, epic,
Last year.
epic writing.
That and Christopher Golden's Snowblind.
Snowblind.
Fantastic. 2 great books. If I had to pick 2 books for anybody that really wants to read contemporary horror, those would be the 2 books I would recommend.
Terrific stuff. And we have the opportunity, thanks to you getting this arranged and everything, to be able to tell people about some of the folks that
What's out there.
we love. And if they watch this on YouTube or something like that, and if they want to leave comments about the people they love, that would be fun too.
Yeah, that
Because
would-
I love discovering
That's
new
a good
people.
idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be really cool.
We better move on because
Yeah.
we've got a new segment.
Tony, if I could interject for a second.
Yes, you may.
There was 2 deaths in the horror community recently. One was Tanith Leigh, the English author, and
Tom Piccirilli.
Yeah.
I get choked up when I talk about Tom. I love Tom. He was a great author. I was very fortunate to meet him back in 2009 at a conference. We've stayed in touch over the years. He and his wife Michelle are both also very acclaimed poets, and it was just it really that one hurt. That was tough, and we knew he was sick. We knew he was ill, and we found out I think it was 2 years ago that he had a brain tumor, and about I want to say a month ago he had a relapse and was in the hospital, and he passed last week. So we mentioned him at Nikon. He was brought up there, and in the little private circles everybody gathered in, we talked about Tom, and it's just a tough passing, not only personally for a lot of people, but for the horror and the crime community, the noir community. He was very big in that also.
Yeah, and one of the nice things has been after meeting Tom, with the presence of things like Facebook, sometimes it can become a little bit overwhelming, getting input from so many different people, and you try to express some sentiment for someone getting married or a child doing something great in their lives, or whatever it might be. And then when we heard about Tom's illness, his wife came on there and had told. I mean, everybody was just.
It was devastating.
Really,
Yeah.
really hurting. But we were also hopeful that he was going to be able to get better, and they're.
Well, he did.
Yeah.
He was in remission for,
Exactly.
I think it was almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Or at least a year. And he was writing again. He actually sold some stories, and I think he had a lot of big plans.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tom Piccarelli,
Yeah.
good guy. And Tanith Leigh, I'm glad you mentioned Tanith as well. I met her a couple times, had breakfast with Tanith and her partner, terrific guy, back over in England in Brighton at one of the British Fantasy Society gatherings. And what a nice woman, and her writing was just really, really, the style of her writing was terrific. I mean, she really understood the art, and in particular in a way that only, it seems, many British people seem to get sometimes. They have an angle on the language that it seems to be more prevalent among Brits. She was a really nice woman.
Yeah,
She had just won a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Horror Writers Association before she passed.
Yeah, so Tanith Leigh, rest in peace, Tom, so many other people. Jesus
so
Gonzalez
many.
recently
Jesus,
died,
yeah.
J.F. Gonzalez. So if you're interested and you're watching this, if you want to remember Tanith Leigh, Tanithlee, Tanith Leigh, Tom Piccarelli,
Piccrilli.
LLI, and Jesus Gonzalez went by J.F. Gonzalez. And then I'll talk about someone else too that a little bit later on. Got somebody to tell them about.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure, absolutely. Yep.
As I mentioned, we're going to start a new segment here, and we hope it continues from here on.
It needs to.
I think so too.
yeah.
What we've decided to do is to each pick an author, an artist, an individual that we really enjoy reading. Again, it can be any discipline, but today we're focusing on authors and books. And I guess I'll go first. We'll go in order here. The gentleman I've picked that I really want you to go out, buy his books, read his work, look at his artwork, is Keith Minion. Keith Minion sold his first story way back in 1979 to Asimov's Sci-Fi Adventure magazine. So he's been around for a while. He sold more than 20 stories, some novellas, in an art book. In fact, I'm going to just move my notes here, and I'm going to hold this art book up just for a second. It's called Dark Work. It's by Keith Minion, and he's probably one of the my favorite artists. If you go through it, there's black and whites, there's acrylics, a lot of illustrations, some in color, some ink and pen, some pencil. But they're terrific pictures, drawings, illustrations. You can get that on Amazon. And as a personal aside, I want to show you a painting that, a drawing that Keith did for me. A little background: I wrote a story for Eulogies 2 called Cha Young and Don Sung's Song. And to make a long story short, it's a story about it occurs in ancient Korea, and Cha Young is the beautiful young woman in a Korean village, and Dong Sung really loves this woman and does everything he can to be with her. Finally, he arranges a tryst for her out in the woods. She meets him out in the woods. Something terrible happens, and she winds up leaving him. Just then, this little imp comes out of the bushes, and the imp is just about ready to kill him, but they make a deal, and the imp winds up granting him one wish, and Dong Sung wishes that he would be the thing that Cha Young covets the most. Well, he gets his wish, and of course there's a twist to it at the end. But it's in Eulogies 2. Oh, I've got that here.
That's the
2.
bottom
There
one.
it is. Published by Horror World, Nancy Calanta, Chris Jones, and myself. Speaking of Chris Jones, he was so happy that I helped him with the anthology. I became one of the editors. That he commissioned Keith to make a painting of the character.
That is beautiful.
It is unbelievable. This is probably the most valued thing in my
Wow.
den, object in my den. It's hanging up on my wall.
That's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. It's the original. Picture of Cha Young and the little imp
That's amazing.
looking over her
That's
shoulder.
awesome.
So I thought I would share that. And I'd like to share a little bit about his fictional work also. Just to continue, a little bit about his background. He was a school teacher, a DoD programmer, and he was an officer in the Navy. And the reason I bring that up is he's got a story in this short story book called It's For You, called The Sagrasso Sea. It is probably one of the best things by Keith I've ever read. And it's based on his adventures on a boat near the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh, man.
So if you get a chance, read that. It's a story, once you pick up and read, you'll never forget. He's also got a book called Up in the Boneyard, called The Boneyard, The Bone Worms, and Island Funeral. And the thing I like about Keith is that his prose can be very visceral, but he's just as effective as when he's subtle. He's a master at setting up his readers. He goes. I don't want to say he goes for the jugular because that sounds a little bit too strong. But what he does is he prepares the reader for the conflict that's coming. We're waiting for the tension, and I want to read a couple paragraphs from one of Keith's stories in Island Funeral. It's the beginning of the book.
Looks like he signed that for you as well. Put some artwork in
Oh,
there.
he did. He did.
That's cool.
Keith's a friend. He's a buddy, and I don't think I've ever met a more talented man in my life. I think the world of Keith. This one's a little heartbreaking, and this gives you an idea of how he sets you up. And once you start reading, you can't stop. This is Island Funeral by Keith Minion. Sarah whispered, "I want to be buried at home, in the family plot, on the mainland." What? I shook my head, blinking away sleep. What did you say? On the morning of our honeymoon, Sarah was talking about dying? Graveyards? Promise me you'll do that, Tim, she whispered, just a ghost beside me in the blue dawn shadows. But, honey, she reached over and held my face in her hands. Promise me, Tim. Since when do we talk about things like this? Since never. That's why it's so important. Promise me, Tim. Okay, sure. I kissed her. It was only then that I felt the wetness on her cheeks and knew she had been crying. Hey, it's okay. Really, I promise. Promises made, promises kept, promises broken. 4 years later, following the hearse that was carrying my Sarah home, the memory of that newlywed morning conversation played over and over in my head. Promise me, Tim. Promise me.
Oh,
Doesn't that give you shivers? I mean, the guy is fantastic.
That's
He's a great
beautiful.
writer.
Yeah.
I
It
like
is.
that. She was a ghost in the morning blue.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it always amazes me when someone is such a talented artist and writer.
Great point.
The man is amazing. He's also a builder of sorts. He's a craftsman. He puts together so many bookcases. He redid his kitchen. He's working on his deck. I don't believe there's anything the man can't do. I wouldn't be surprised if he told me he could fly a plane.
Where's Keith from? Do you know?
Yeah, he's in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. He just moved there.
I see. Okay.
So he lives next to Nancy Calanta, as a matter of fact.
Keith Minion, Minnion.
Yeah. So look him up. He did all the artwork also, I should say, for Eulogies 3, and that's also by Horror World Press. Editors, me, Nancy Calanta, and Chris Jones. But every story, he did a drawing, and it turns out we're the last anthology that he's going to be doing personal line art for. So we can't thank him enough. He's part of the Eulogies family, and we're just grateful for everything he's done for us. So if you get a chance, I would recommend you pick up The Boneyard or The Bone Worms, Island Funeral. It's For You, and I think there's only a few more copies left on It's For You on Amazon. You might want to pick that up before it does sell out. And his book of art, Dark Work, and that's from SST Press.
Oh, that's a great press. I love them.
Paul Fry.
He's
Yeah.
fantastic. Nice guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your turn.
Sure, and it's always interesting for me to hear people mention the names of the people who are behind things. You know, Phil publishing, you doing editing on that. You mentioned Paul Fry. You know, these people that you hear about, and then later you meet them, and occasionally opportunities come along where things just sync up.
They gel.
And I love that you got that drawing. That is so cool, man. That's something to hold on to.
I look at that every day, and I'm so amazed by the man's talent, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's so personal. He really read. He really understood what I was trying to do.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, for my opportunity to tell the audience about a particular writer, I actually I'm not going to tell you who she chose, obviously, but man, when I found out who she chose, I was like, oh man.
Well, I did
Why
the
didn't
same
I do
thing.
I know. I was
did
like,
the
oh,
same
he's
thing
so
with
good.
you,
Yeah, because this person's already established his name amongst other people, and this other person is brilliantly talented and just starting to get recognized by some people, mostly his friends, that he's saying, oh, will you check this out? Like, you're scaring me. This is so good. But I wanted to mention, I was thinking about doing something from Library of the Dead, but that we already talked about Library of the Dead. So I decided I wanted to go with a person who died just this past year. And he was a friend of mine from England, and his name is Graham Joyce. And you hear the name Graham Joyce, and Graham, for people who are interested in fantasy, as in not classical sword and sorcery fantasy, but the fantastic, also interested in horror, interested in anything that might be unusual or out of this world, with mixed with in a really keen sense of psychology, and just an amazing ability to write. The prose that he produced was incredible. Graham Joyce, Joyce, is his name. And Graham was diagnosed with cancer. He died last year. And he was an amazingly nice man. And just to let you know, I had known Graham because we met at the World Horror Convention in 2010, and then again we became friends in 2011 when I joined the British Fantasy Society, and we would talk. And Graham, strapping, strong guy,
so
fit,
handsome,
not immense, but just fit. Looked like he, like he played soccer all the time, and he did. Usually had a great cut on his shirts and sort of like cloth, almost like this, short sleeves a lot of times. Great looking guy, and and it was fascinating because we got along great. And I just thought of him as, well, Graham Joyce, there's Graham, or there's Sarah Pinborough, or the Mark Morris, or Guy Adams, or whoever you encounter, and they write. And you say to yourself, oh yeah, I got to get around to reading something of Graham's, right? So flash forward a couple months, and from like 2010 to 2011 or so, and I'm in Barnes and Noble checking books out, and I see and this story, and I mentioned this before, but I think it's something to tell people. Sometimes you don't realize the level of expertise and talent of whatever field until it sort of hits you in the face. So I would go into Barnes & Noble and I would look at books and I'd pick them up off the shelf and I'd read the back. And so I see this book by this guy Graham Joyce at Barnes & Noble, new hardcover, just released. I'm like, oh yeah. And on the back it says, Graham Joyce, the greatest practitioner of British fantasy living today. And I'm like, oh wow, this guy Graham Joyce. Not making any connection in my brain
to the man you met.
Graham Joyce I know. It's like, oh wow, I'm going to have to get these books by Graham Joyce. People really respect this guy's writing. It seems like he's a real heavy hitter. Yeah, I'll have to get one of those sometime. So then I'm there in 2012 over at the British Fantasy Society gathering in Brighton, and Graham and I are talking in front of the bar, and we're talking about how he teaches writing and creative writing in English, and loves to play soccer and all these different things. And he looks at his watch, he says, oh God, I've got to go do my reading. And I was like, oh yeah, hey, I'll follow you up. So we go through this Byzantine hallways, up the stairs through the Byzantine hallways in the hotel. And
I think I know where this is headed.
yeah, he's a little bit ahead of me, so he goes around the corner, and I go around the corner, and it's just the whole hallway before you even get to the room, which is just a tiny like corner room that they took the beds out of. So it's just the hallway is packed with people. I'm like, wow, man, these readings are really popular. Wow, this is great. He's going to have a good crowd, you know? So then I go into the room, and there are people standing on the windowsills to hear Graham Joyce. I'm like, boy, Graham must have a lot of friends. This is great. And he did have a lot of friends there, you know, and because everybody loved Graham. And so tough he's gone. But anyway.
What do you got?
Yeah, so he sat down and he read. And then I was like, because it was so good, I was like, oh my God. That's Graham Joyce. That's
It's
the Graham
flashback,
Joyce. Like,
yeah.
oh, geez. And I told him that later. He thought it was really funny. I was like, oh, I had no idea, Graham, that you were the guy. I kept saying everybody respect you so much. This is from his novel called Requiem, which was released, what was the year of release on this? 1995 is the copyright date on this.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's very, very interesting stuff. And just to give you a quick one here, this comes from Booklist. Joyce explores the shape and texture of truth, walks the thin line between the religious and the sexual, and makes readers marvel at the power of the spirit and the psyche. The book generates the suspense of a fine thriller in its pursuit of religious themes. It is as piercing as any theological exploration, and as haunting, and as a haunting expression of magic realism, it evokes the work of Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Wow.
And Ramsey Campbell has a great quote on here: a profoundly mysterious fantasy with its roots deep in truth, awesome and beautiful and terrifying. I wish I could write half as eloquently. From Ramsey Campbell.
Are you going to read something?
Yes, this
Beautiful.
has a lot to
Great.
do with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Won't tell you too much, but it's an amazing story about some people who are hunting around and archaeological things in the Middle East. So I'll read you one section here, and just to show you how I love how writers can describe things beautifully, but also show human psychology. And Graham had both of those down. This is from chapter 24. Sharon had promised to drive Tom to the archaeological sites of Qumran and Masada by the Dead Sea. 6 bottles of mineral water lay on the back seat of the car. Hot up there, she said. They drove through the desert with windows open to the hot, humid air. Smells of warm dust and roadside sage wafted into the car. Tom blinked at the soft-shouldered mountains, mauve and hazy in the distance beneath the blue sky. At Masada, they got out of the car, and Sharon pointed to the summit. A serpentine path climbed to the top of the sphinx-like rock. Or there was a cable car. He surveyed the astonishing spiral path. 2 backpackers were making slow progress along an edge, like 2 beetles, carapaces winking in the sun. It was already hot and getting hotter. Behind them, the arid desert plain, winds sculptured into weird pyramids and cones of sand, shimmered like lime. A bubble of sweat formed on his brow. I hope we're going by cable car, he said. The more difficult route offers the best experience, she said, Sybil-like. We'll need the water. So there's some marital infidelity that occurs in this story, and here is a moment when a man has been with his wife and he realizes that he has made a profound mistake. From the time he and Katie had fallen in love, they had enjoyed a period of rich telepathy, no different from that of all lovers in the first thrill of connection, a telepathy apparent from the ability to second-guess their partner's next words, to feel their needs, to communicate in a shorthand which was almost a code, to detect hidden thoughts. Perhaps by some special grace, their period of telepathic insight had been extended beyond the norm, but when it was taken away, as it was in that moment when he had been with his wife, he had known it was irrevocable. The special grace had been withdrawn. It had felt like a death. It was a death. Katie had felt it too. The expression of hurt and bewilderment on her face had suggested it all, but they couldn't speak about it, because where was the betrayal? It was all too abstract, beyond reference, but her eyes showed that she knew.
A glint of hoarfrost chilled them as she glanced back at him, before turning a cold back, covering herself and feigning sleep. So you know that they've been intimate,
Yeah.
and in that moment, it was lost. It's good stuff. Graham Joyce, this is his novel Requiem. He has a bunch of great novels.
The
And
Silent Land.
yeah.
And Gard, how old was he when he passed?
You know, I don't
he
know.
was,
I think he was in his early 50s.
Yeah, he
That's
was
young.
young.
52.
Yeah,
Awfully young.
he was very young.
Yeah, man. And we all thought he was going to make it, but shoot, he didn't make it.
It's terrible.
Yeah. Anyway, so thanks for letting me take the time.
Oh, believe me, my pleasure, and we're going to do this every week. Sid?
Okay, so I chose John Bowden, who is just brilliant, as Gard said, and he works for Shock Totem. He edits for Shock Totem, which is one of my favorite magazines, and he writes nonfiction articles in several of the issues, but also writes a lot of fiction as well. And he's really great at the nonfiction pieces. And in issue 7, which is one of my favorites, I have the entire catalog thanks to Ken Wood.
It was great of him.
Yeah, he's a doll. When I was sick, he sent me the entire catalog, which is.
And who is Ken Wood?
Well, I'll tell you who Ken Wood is. He is he runs Shock Totem Publications. He is the editor and publisher of Shock Totem Publications, and John is a contributing editor. And in the first issue I ever bought and read, it's the only issue I ever bought because Ken sent me the rest of them. I read The Hook, the Hole in the Garden, which was John's nonfiction piece, which is about his father, and it is just absolutely, it's riveting. It's beautiful. It is just emotionally, it's a stunning, beautiful piece, and that's just the nonfiction. His fiction. One of my favorite pieces of his is this book called Dominoes.
The famous
and
Dominoes.
Yeah, this is making its way around our community. And at first glance, it's kind of, unusual. It's it's under the guise of this little golden book like we used to, read as kids. But
I
it is.
still read them.
So
Don't pick
this
up
is
the wrong one.
This is something that you don't want to, leave around and have your child pick up by mistake. But I leave it out because I pick it up all the time and read passages. I don't have, a little one to worry about. But this is absolutely brilliant, and.
Yeah.
And when I read it, I was stunned. I was jealous. I was floored by his prose and his intellect and his ability to put words together. I just,
Oh yeah.
I mean,
oh, yeah.
it's
it's insane. You
he's-
read that thing and you just say to yourself, I got to take some time to
Yeah,
digest
it's-
what I
yeah.
just
Yeah,
experienced.
you do. And everyone who has read it has had the exact same reaction.
Exactly.
So this is not something that, is
It's not for children.
no, it's not for children. No, it's not for children. But I mean, it's not like something that I maybe think is great and someone else would be like,
Oh, everybody that reads it
There
really
seems to be a very
Everyone-
large
it-
consensus on this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Everyone who reads it has the same reaction. It's definitely something very special, and John is something very special. He
Great.
has a unique talent. He has short pieces in some of the special issues of Shock Totem, the holiday issues they do, which I love, these little mini versions, which they have the contributing editors write pieces for, and they invite people to write for. They invited me to write for one of them, the Halloween issue, which I didn't bring, of course. And John also has a story in this Once Upon an Apocalypse, which was edited by Scott Goudsward and Rachel Kenley. He did, these are all reimagined fairy tales, and he wrote one about Pinocchio called Pin. And he also has a great story in this issue of Splatterpunk zine, edited by Jack Bantry, called Down by the Ocean, and it was illustrated by Danielle Serra, who is brilliant. And he's won a British Fantasy Award in the past and is nominated for one again this year. This is a great story by John, Down by the Ocean. It's another brilliant piece of his. It's hard to see the artwork in black and white, but Danielle Serra is
Great artist.
Oh God,
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, I have a lot of his the books that he's illustrated, and I edited one for Villipede by Michael Bailey, and Danielle illustrated it for us. It's just magnificent.
Are you going to read a little bit?
Yes,
Good.
I am going to just read a little passage from Dominoes that, I mean, it all struck me, but this one I could not get out of my head. This is just one of the
This is I haven't read
chapters.
anything in there, so this is my first exposure
Okay,
to
so
it.
this is chapter 2, July 30th, another year older, none the wiser. Mercedes, Nevada, close to the carcass of Las Vegas. Standing still as midnight, Alan is watching the man, astutely listening as he rusts inside, guts as hard as walnut shell. The kind of man who does not speak, but holds words in his mouth like birds, feeling them suffocate, tasting their demise like oily death and old astringent, dead hatchlings in a nest made of used oxypads. Friday wiggles in Alan's breast pocket as he watches and watches and waits and waits. He fills himself with sharp, stale words. Some are husks, like bees from last summer trapped between windows. Others are feral and gray like rats, all of them reassuring as they shake and stop breathing. Like all of his realizations, like the one where God does not exist, but hell surely does. Or the other where it is an eternity and it wears a mask with features that match your own and speaks with a sweet voice that sounds like grandma. Damnation, the sincerest form of flattery.
Wow.
I mean,
That is
it
excellent
is-
writing.
Same, man.
and
It
you know,
is.
it's filled with these ghastly, nightmarish illustrations by Yannick Bouchard, and it is just it's like a combination of a fever dream. It's an apocalyptic. It's brilliant. I can't say enough about it, and
Well, you sold me. I'll be purchasing a copy.
good.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, like I said, it's so funny to see it in this little golden book, and you open it up and you're just blown away.
It's like opening Pandora's box.
It
Like,
is,
Oh my gosh.
and Gard and I did a flash fiction panel with John and James Newman at World Horror Con in Atlanta, and it was great.
That was
'cause
awesome.
John really is good at flash fiction and
Always,
can write 90-word pieces and make them very effective.
And that's hard to do. That's one of
it
the
is-
hardest things to
It is very
write.
hard, but you
Yeah.
can see in this why, because he can put words together and just
Yeah, John's an amazingly great guy, and we are just in sync in so many areas in our personal lives and the things that we value and the things that we think are important, our musical tastes, and his personality is very much, actually very much like mine. when
There's
I'm
two of you?
alone. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
he's a
But,
sweetheart.
Yeah, I just enjoy being around him so much, and I think that John internally he knows he
what would you say? He challenges himself, and he produces this amazing array of just such beautifully written prose. But I think when he looks at himself compared to the outside world, he's just sort of starting.
Right. Well, he's very humble. He's very
extremely
shy.
humble. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
He's
Good,
tough on him. I'll just read his biography real quick, just so everyone knows a little about him, a little bit about him, and what to look for. John Bowden lives a stone's throw from 3 Mile Island with his wonderful wife and sons. A baker by day, he spends his time off writing, working on Shock Totem, or watching MASH reruns. He likes Diet Pepsi, cheeseburgers, heavy metal, and sports ferocious sideburns, which is true. He has the best sideburns, which are actually mutton chops.
Yeah.
While his output as a writer is fairly small, it has a bit of a reputation for being unique. His work has appeared in 52 Stitches, Everyday Weirdness, Medicine, which I'm not familiar with, Black Ink Horror, Weird Year, Nikon eBooks, Shock Totem, and the John Skip edited Psychos.
Great.
He's currently working on several projects. So
Yeah, man.
We've got to move on.
okay.
Okay.
Phil?
I'm going to be quick. I wasn't able to prepare as much as I wanted to due to work. But I decided to go old school and discuss an author from a long time ago. His name is Arthur Machen, and he's out of the UK or Great Britain. And he wrote throughout his life, but his most famous works are from the 1890s, so the gay 90s, Victorian era. And
That is old time.
yeah, the Gilded Age, right?
Yeah.
And his best work was right before H.P. Lovecraft was born, and Lovecraft was born in 1898. And Lovecraft, in his famous essay of influences and great horror writers, specifically mentioned Arthur Machen as one of the greatest. And oddly, Arthur Machen outlived Lovecraft as well, because he passed away in 47, Machen, so he lived about 87 years, I believe. And his tales are very similar to H.P. Lovecraft in the sense that most of his stories are based off of creatures or things that exist in our legends, but however they actually do exist. So a lot of folks know Lovecraft of outer beings and gods, of alien gods and things. What Arthur Machen usually wrote about was about dwarfs and creatures like that, or imps in your case, for your story, the Korean story, do actually exist in the peripheries of society and cause havoc and evil that we don't really see.
He brought fairy tales to horror
Well,
life.
I wouldn't even say fairy tales. I would just say myths in general.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't want to say fairy tales because then people will think something different than what was actually written. He basically believed that all the myths that we've heard, those creatures do exist. And I'm not just talking like vampires and things, but the things that we think are cute, like
Ogres
you said.
and
But they actually do exist. His some of his famous works are always in horror anthologies of the great authors of the past. So books that would have a story of Edgar Allan Poe or Lovecraft, for example, or M.R. James, or any of those folks. His stories are always one of the stories that have always included. And one of his most famous stories, which Stephen King has specifically stated was possibly his favorite horror story of all time, is called Great God Pan. And again, here's another mytho, the Greek myths, but that's more of a metaphor of what is actually in that tale. It's something else and they just call it Pan. But I won't get into it because people should read it. You can find all his works pretty much in the common domain because it's so old that it's out
Public
of
domain, yeah.
public domain. Thank you. It's so old that anybody can actually publish it.
copyrights are
yeah,
all
so you
expired
can buy e-books of it for like $2 less. You can find his stories for free online at points. But if you want to buy a collection, you can get almost a lot of his best tales for like $8.
So if you're a Lovecraft fan, you would say, without a doubt, take a look at.
No, absolutely,
okay.
most certainly. And if you wanted to hear any of his tales, you can go to YouTube, type in Arthur Machen, Machen, and there's thousands, well, I wouldn't say thousands, but hundreds of versions of his tales where people have read them and made them into
Oh, great,
ebooks.
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I do have only one sentence I want to read because it pretty much exemplifies his tales, and
Sure.
it does come from his most famous tale, which is The Great God Pan.
Okay.
And I actually use it a lot for intros to some of the books that I publish. And it's simply this. He was conscious of being involved in an affair not altogether reputable, and for many years afterwards he clung to the commonplace. And this specifically is about what you had at Nikon, which is mental illness and horror. And his stories are like that, where
Yeah.
people go insane due to these things that aren't supposed to be real, and yet they are.
Great.
So,
Well, thank you very much.
yep, no problem.
Hey, I
Good
should
choice.
just mention also, if people are looking for John's work, it's Boden, John Bowden. And so if they get a chance, and Shock Totem, great stuff. That Macon quote is interesting.
Yeah.
You know,
Very
that's good
cool.
stuff. Cool.
Well, this is quite an interesting show. We all got to talk
Yep.
about the authors we really love and enjoy, and wish that other people would do the same. Thank you, guys. It's been, like I said, a great show, and next week we're going to have some great guests for interviews.
Yeah.
Kyle Rader,
Yep.
Patrick Lacey,
Yep.
and Dan
Dan Cohen.
Cohen. I can never get his last name right, but please join us next week, and we'll be interviewing those three gentlemen, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
Thank you.